Tēnā koutou katoa. Rural Women New Zealand has been supporting our rural community since 1925. The isolation of our rural women and their families and communities has always been a focus for us. In those days, it was the isolation of distance and not having access to things like phone or power. Today, there is still isolation, but it has changed in the way we see it. Digital isolation is a major issue for all our rural communities. Access to affordable and adequate connectivity. Rural Women New Zealand congratulates the work that has gone on the RBI1 and what is still going on with RBI2, and acknowledge those amazing WISPs that are getting it even further out into our rural communities. However, there is more to be done if we are to achieve equity for those living rurally. There is the statistic that we've heard of 50% of New Zealand's geography still doesn't have cell phone coverage. So New Zealand's rural population is the next biggest in numbers to Auckland, and is just a bit more spread out, and that's over a lot of that 50% that doesn't have coverage. The Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are an urgent call for all countries, developed and developing, to actually act. They recognise ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies improving health and education, reducing inequality and spurring economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. New Zealand is due to report on this year, and we've signed up to achieve these by 2030. When we look at these, we see that connectivity ties in very strongly with them. And how are we doing? So Rural Women New Zealand believes that by ensuring that all rural families and communities have access to the affordable, adequate connectivity that they need, then many of these goals will be on the way to being reached. And the talk of Rugby World Cup and Netflix is great, but there's a lot of us out there it's just a pipe dream for still. Goal 3 of the Sustainable Development Goals is good health and well-being. Ensuring that the social isolation can be overcome and being able to connect with others will help with this. Having online technology such as telehealth and online counselling and having appointments online can be used to often save long drives for those who live out in the country and reaching the ever more centralised health services we have. And one of the big reasons for having connectivity, especially cell phone coverage in rural, is health and safety. If your landline is down, the power is out, or there is an emergency and you have to leave your house, or there's an accident, how far do we have to go to get call for help? And then often it's a very long way. Goal 4 is quality education. Rural Women New Zealand applauds all schools having high-speed internet for our children's learning. However, there are many families out there in rural where children cannot access the internet, either because of the affordability or the lack of access. And there are those attempting to do online tertiary studying. It's vital that they have access to services. And this is possibly where we could use our schools as community hubs to make sure that they get access to high-speed internet. Goal 8 and Goal 9, which are decent work and economic growth, and industry, innovation and infrastructure, go together, for that our rural businesses can run successful, efficient and innovative businesses. We need that quality connectivity to work. Real-time data, monitoring and marketing, to name but a few issues for our modern businesses. It's very hard to do when that infrastructure isn't there. We hold the NZI Rural Women New Zealand Business Awards each year, and a lot of our women that enter these awards showcase the challenges they have of having businesses in rural communities. And I'd like to acknowledge one of our winners, the WISP was Wireless Bridget, who has actually been in their innovative category supporting our rural women out in the Wairarapa with their businesses, so thank you. Goal 11 is sustainable cities and communities. This is incredibly difficult to do, and Goal 10 is reduced inequalities, and that isn't achieved. Attracting staff to rural businesses is hard enough, but when you add in the factor of low or no connectivity, and that makes it even more difficult to do. Why do they want to move out to those rural communities if we can't give it to them? Very hard to attract businesses to these areas as well. So yet again, our rural communities struggle to attract and retain people, businesses and families. And thank you again to the WISPs for the work they do in these remote areas. Goal 17 is partnerships for the goals. It is all of us working together to achieve them. We can't just expect the government to do this. We need to recognise our roles in the process. How can we help? If we put the technology lens over the Sustainable Development Goals, the feeling is that rural New Zealand is missing out. We are not meeting these goals, and if the inequity in access to decent technology doesn't improve, we will never meet them. And going along with this, where does technology and connectivity fit into the Living Standards framework? How does it fit into the wellbeing budget that's been announced? We need to think about this when we have the discussions. So without the SDGs being achieved, without them being acknowledged in the Living Standards framework and the wellbeing budget, isolation will still remain for our rural women, families and communities for the time to come. Kia ora.